Level 1. The Soap Lady. There's a woman in a glass case in Philadelphia who's been dead for over 100 years. Her face is still visible. Her clothing clings to what remains of her body. She doesn't look decomposed in the usual sense. She looks waxy, hardened, pale yellow-gray, like old tallow left in a drawer. She's called the Soap Lady, and the name is accurate. Her body underwent a process called saponification. Under the right conditions, alkaline soil, moisture, minimal oxygen, human fat doesn't rot. It transforms. The triglycerides in body tissue react with minerals in the ground and harden into a substance chemically similar to soap, adipose or corpse wax. It's rare, but it's documented. It's understood. The woman was buried somewhere in Philadelphia in the 19th century. When her remains were exhumed, they hadn't decayed. They'd solidified. Her features were preserved, not mummified, not skeletal, but converted into something else entirely. A biological byproduct that shouldn't feel as unsettling as it does. The museum keeps her behind glass for educational purposes. She demonstrates postmortem chemistry. Visitors can see the progression of saponification across different parts of the body, the face more intact than the limbs, fabric still pressed against tissue that no longer behaves like flesh. There's nothing supernatural about her. No mystery. The science is clean. Alkaline environment plus body fat plus time equals this. But she still looks human. That's the part that lingers. She's not bones. She's not dust. She's recognizable. The structure of her face is there. The shape of her hands. You can tell she was a person. And that person is now a chemistry exhibit in a jar. It's educational, it's morbid, it's explainable, and it stays with you longer than it should. Level 2. Shrunken heads. Human heads the size of oranges, skin darkened to leather, hair still attached, lips sewn shut with fiber cord. The Pitt Rivers Museum in Oxford holds several Sansa, shrunken heads created through a ritual process practiced by Giveroing groups in Ecuador and Peru. The method is documented. The head is removed, the skull extracted, the skin boiled in tannin-rich water, then dried with hot stones and sand. What remains is small, preserved, unmistakably human. But there's a problem. No one is certain which heads in the collection are real. During the late 19th and early 20th centuries, demand for Sansa among Western collectors created a market. Forgers in South America began producing fake shrunken heads using animal skin, unclaimed bodies, and hospital cadavers. Some were sold as authentic ceremonial objects. Others were openly marketed as curiosities. The line blurred quickly. Authentication is difficult. The process works on any mammalian tissue. A genuine Sansa and a well-made forgery can be nearly identical under examination. Museums have tested their collections. Results are inconclusive for many specimens. Even when a head is confirmed as human, its origin remains unclear. The original purpose of Sansa is contested. Some anthropologists argue they were created to trap the spirit of an enemy, preventing revenge. Others suggest they were trophies. A few propose protective functions. The rituals surrounding their creation were not fully documented before the practice was suppressed, and the cultures that produced them have since altered or lost those traditions. So the museums are left with objects they cannot fully verify, created for reasons they cannot confirm, by people whose descendants may want them returned. The ethical debate is ongoing. Should these heads remain on display as anthropological artifacts? Should they be repatriated, even when their specific tribal origin is unknown? Should they be stored away entirely? The heads themselves offer no answers. They sit behind glass, lips stitched closed, origins murky, and the museums that hold them are no longer certain what they actually possess. Level 3. The Baghdad Battery. It's a clay jar, 13 centimeters tall. Inside, a copper cylinder. Inside that, an iron rod suspended by an asphalt seal. Dated between 250 BCE and 250 CE. If you fill it with vinegar, lemon juice, or any acidic electrolyte solution, it produces roughly 1 volt of electricity. The object predates Alessandro Volta's invention of the battery by 1800 years. That shouldn't be possible, not according to the accepted technological timeline. The ancient Parthians, who created this object, had no documented understanding of electricity, no evidence of wire, no circuits, no devices that would require electrical power, no contemporary sources describing anything resembling electrical experimentation. And yet the jar works. Alternative explanations exist. Some scholars argue it was used to store sacred scrolls. Others suggest it held ritual offerings. A few propose it's purely decorative, and the electrical properties are coincidental, but the construction is specific. Copper and iron are deliberate choices for an electrochemical reaction. The asphalt seal prevents the metals from touching directly, necessary for current flow. The design is functional, whether or not function was intended. No similar artifacts have been found, not in Parthia, not in neighboring cultures, not in earlier or later periods. It stands alone in the archaeological record. This creates a problem. If the Parthians discovered electrical generation, even accidentally, why is there no progression, no refinement, no additional evidence of exploration or application? Technologies don't appear in isolation and then vanish without trace. They iterate, they spread, they leave context. This one doesn't. The jar sits in the National Museum of Iraq, or it did, before the 2003 looting. Its current location is uncertain. Photographs remain. Replicas have been built. They all produce voltage, but the original context is lost. What remains is an object that either rewrites the history of electrical discovery or represents the most coincidental arrangement of materials in the archaeological record. Either way, it doesn't fit, and the timeline it implies is more disturbing than the artifact itself. Level 4. The Voynich Manuscript. People don't create languages by accident. The Voynich Manuscript is 240 pages of writing that follows consistent grammatical rules, demonstrates statistical patterns found in natural language, and corresponds to no alphabet, script, or linguistic family anywhere in human record. It was carbon dated to the early 15th century, somewhere between 1404 and 1438. The text is accompanied by illustrations, botanical drawings of plants that don't exist, root systems and flowers that match no known species, living or extinct, cosmological diagrams with unfamiliar stellar arrangements, biological imagery showing human figures and connected vessels filled with green liquid, pharmaceutical sections depicting unidentifiable herbs arranged in ways that suggest preparation or classification. Every section implies purpose, organization, knowledge being transmitted, but no one can read it. Cryptographers have tried, linguists have tried, AI pattern recognition systems have tried. The text is not a substitution cipher. It's not encoded Latin, Hebrew, or Arabic. It's not gibberish. Statistical analysis confirms it has structure, word length distribution, repetition patterns, syntactic consistency. It behaves like language. It just isn't one we know. That's what creates the discomfort. If it were random, it would be dismissible, a hoax, an elaborate forgery. But the internal consistency is too deep. The manuscript follows its own rules across every page. Words appear in predictable frequencies. Sentence structures repeat in ways that mirror natural grammar. Someone wrote this with fluency, which means someone understood it. The question isn't whether the manuscript is real. It is. The vellum is genuine. The ink is period appropriate. The binding matches 15th century techniques. The question is, what knowledge system existed in 1404 that left no other trace? No alphabet survives that matches the script. No botanical tradition depicts those plants. No cosmological model uses those diagrams. The manuscript appears fully formed, with no evolutionary predecessors and no descendants. It's not a fragment of something lost. It's a complete work in a framework that shouldn't exist. And the most unsettling part is how little reaction that impossibility generates. The manuscript sits in a library. Scholars study it. Theories circulate. But no one can explain why it's coherent. Level 5. The Antikythera Mechanism. In 1901, sponge divers found a Roman shipwreck off the Greek island of Antikythera. Among the statues and pottery was a corroded lump of bronze gears. It took 70 years to understand what it was. The Antikythera mechanism is an astronomical calculator. 30 interlocking bronze gears housed in a wooden frame. It tracked lunar phases, predicted eclipses, modeled planetary motion, and calculated the 4-year cycle of the Olympic Games. It was built around 60 BCE. The next device of comparable mechanical complexity doesn't appear in the historical record until the 14th century, 1300 years later. That gap is the problem. Some researchers argue it represents a lost Hellenistic technological tradition, an advanced scientific culture whose works were destroyed in the decline of Rome, leaving only this single fragment. They point to references in ancient texts, descriptions of celestial spheres, mentions of devices built by Archimedes and Posidonius. Others call it an outlier, a one-time achievement by a singular genius, unconnected to broader infrastructure. They note the absence of developmental artifacts, no simpler predecessors, no failed prototypes, no incremental progression toward this level of engineering. Both explanations have issues. If it's part of a tradition, where are the other devices? If it's an isolated creation, how did one person develop gear-cutting techniques, differential mechanisms, and astronomical modeling without collaborative knowledge? The mechanism itself offers no clarity. X-ray imaging revealed the full gear system. Inscriptions were translated. Functions were reconstructed. It works. Researchers built replicas. They function exactly as intended. But the origin remains contested. Academic papers contradict each other. Conferences turn hostile. Some experts refuse to accept certain interpretations. Others dismiss entire schools of thought. The artifact has created a schism, and what's strange is how much anger it generates. Historians don't typically argue this bitterly over pottery or coins, but the Antikythera mechanism makes people defensive, territorial. Certain schools of thought treat alternative theories as professional attacks. The object doesn't just challenge historical understanding, it challenges the experts who built their careers on that understanding. And when the authorities can't agree on what something is, where it came from, or whether it should exist, the artifact stops feeling like an anomaly and starts feeling like a problem no one wants to solve. Level 6. The Dropa Stones. In 1938, archaeologist Chi Pu Ti reportedly led an expedition into the Bayanhar Mountains on the border between China and Tibet. In a series of caves, his team allegedly found 716 granite discs, each roughly 9 inches in diameter, with a hole in the center, and a double groove spiraling outward from the middle to the edge. The grooves contained what appeared to be writing. According to the account, the discs were dated to approximately 10,000 BCE. The script was translated in 1962 by a professor named Samum Nui. His interpretation: the discs describe a spacecraft crash landing 12,000 years ago. The survivors, referred to as the Dropa, integrated with local mountain tribes after their ship became irreparable. The story circulated through fringe archaeology publications for decades. Photographs appeared. Diagrams were published. Researchers cited the work, but no one can locate the stones. China's academic institutions deny housing them. The Banpo Museum in Xi'an, often cited as their location, has no record of the artifacts. Requests to examine the discs are met with claims they never existed. Archives contain no mention of Chi Pu Ti's expedition. Samum Nui cannot be verified as a real academic. The photographs that exist are disputed. Some show similar-looking objects, but provenance is unclear. Others are demonstrably unrelated artifacts from different sites, misattributed through repetition. Yet the story won't die. It gets cited, repeated, presented as suppressed evidence. Believers claim the Chinese government confiscated the discs to avoid historical disruption. Skeptics call it a Cold War-era hoax designed to exploit Western interest in ancient astronaut theories. Both groups assume the stones existed at some point, but there's no verified specimen, no museum catalog, no peer-reviewed analysis, no physical object anyone can examine. What remains is a narrative about an object that breaks every rule. Too old for written language, wrong material for text preservation, impossible content for the period, and a complete absence of evidence. Either it's an elaborate fabrication, or something was removed from the record entirely. And the more unsettling possibility is that both could be true, that someone created a hoax around something real, and now neither can be proven. Level 7. The London Hammer. There is a hammer embedded in rock that predates the existence of humans by 400 million years. It was found in 1936 near London, Texas, partially encased in a nodule of Ordovician limestone. The rock formation dates to a period when life on Earth consisted of marine invertebrates and early fish. No land animals, no plants above ankle height, no primates, no hominids, no toolmakers. The hammer is iron and wood, 6 inches long, metal head with a wooden handle. The handle has partially fossilized into the surrounding stone. Metallurgical analysis shows the iron contains a purity level inconsistent with natural formation. It was smelted. The composition suggests deliberate manufacturing. The wood has begun to mineralize, replacing organic tissue with stone while retaining structural detail. It should not exist. Conventional explanations propose rapid concretion, a modern hammer encased in a mineral deposit that hardened quickly, creating the illusion of ancient fusion. Others suggest the rock formation was misidentified, that the limestone is far younger than believed. But the fossilization of the handle is ongoing. The transition from wood to stone is visible under examination. The metal shows no corrosion, despite being surrounded by mineralized sediment. And the nodule itself, when broken open, showed no signs of recent intrusion. The hammer was inside the rock, not pressed into a crack. No peer-reviewed geological study accepts it as authentically Ordovician. But no one has explained how it got there. The object sits in a small museum in Texas, largely ignored by mainstream academia. It's dismissed as a misinterpretation, a curiosity, an error in dating or context. Yet it remains physical. Real metal, real stone, real fusion between the two. If the dating is wrong, geology has failed at a fundamental level. If the hammer is modern, fossilization has occurred at an impossible rate. If neither explanation holds, then an object was manufactured 400 million years before the existence of hands capable of holding it. There is no framework that allows this to be true, and there is no evidence sufficient to prove it false. The hammer exists in a space where reality cannot reconcile itself, where every explanation creates a larger problem than the object it attempts to explain. It doesn't demand belief. It just refuses to be dismissed. The objects in museum collections don't always follow the rules we've written for them. Some resist explanation, some contradict timelines. Others simply exist in ways that make experts uncomfortable. These aren't ghost stories. They're physical artifacts with provenance, documentation, and measurable properties. They've been studied, cataloged, and displayed, yet they remain unresolved. History isn't as stable as we assume. The archaeological record has gaps. Scientific consensus shifts when confronted with objects that refuse to fit. And somewhere in a museum right now, behind glass or locked in storage, there's an artifact that shouldn't exist, but does.